What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Barefoot Garage and the Project 914. Today we're doing a simple handling upgrade, some rear shocks, some rear springs from 914 Rubber. We're gonna get this old thing handling a lot more like
it looks like it should. Let's go.
So if you have paid attention to my channel or heard about this car, a lot of people say, do you race it? Was it raced? And the answer was really not that I'm aware of. I've done a little bit of autocross, like once. I would like to get to the place where I feel confident taking to a track day or things like that. So at this point, we're trying to transition it from kind of looking like it should have been a race car to having some genuine performance parts, safety items, things that are going to help it run, ride, drive, corner better, and like the best Porsche ever made, the mid-engine car, the 914 was. So today we are going to be putting on a set of brand new Bilstein rear shocks. It's the HDs, and a set of 100 pound per inch coils from 914 Rubber. So shout out to those guys for a sweet piece of work to go onto the car. I helped install, somebody had these springs to put install in their car, I don't know, a couple years ago. They're a really nice piece. So I've been looking forward to get a setup for mine as soon as I upgraded from the old KYBs. So when this car was put together in 2017, I was really strict on the budget, and I put a set of KYB shocks in here. You can kind of see the silver KYBs there. So they're a gas charged, and in reality, they're incredibly stiff. And so like the front shocks are stiff to the point that if you hit a good enough bump, the rebound is so strong that the car actually bounces up off the ground, or at least that's what it feels like inside. So when I went through and did the wheel spacers and all of that with the front, changed the discs, changed the brake pads, did all that, I just bit the bullet and put Bilsteins in the front. I did not video that, sorry. It's not particularly complicated. At some point, the front end's gonna come back apart because I wanna put polybronze bushings in, and we need an alignment, and I may put decambered ball joints and just all kinds of stuff in it for a car that's genuinely kind of slow, but I want it to be able to corner nice and fast. So the front already has Bilsteins. These are the matching rear. I really can't remember if it's the B6 or the B8. It's the whichever one I just put right there. But they're the only matching set front to rear. There are two different Bilsteins for the front with some lowering, and so I decided to not go with Conies. I think the Bilsteins is the right move, and I gotta tell you, from like driving it 2 or 3 times with those front shocks, it is firm, but the ride is incredibly better. So I'm really looking forward to having these Bilsteins in the rear. So let's take a look at parts, let's take a look at tools, and then we'll dive in to changing the shocks on the 914.
Tools and parts. All right, here's what you need to get this job done. Something to take off the wheels and torque them back to spec. Ideally, a 19mm ratcheting wrench. I just picked up these gear wrenches, and they've actually been excellent. You need, for these Bilsteins, you need a 6mm hex key. I like the socket ones. You can use whatever you got. Channel locks, maybe some adjustable wrenches. The old shocks have a flat, and I use this to get it off with the 19mm wrench, but the new ones have a hex, so you need both. If you have a rear sway bar, which my car does, it was added from a 73, you're gonna need something to pop that on and off, so maybe a big hammer. You can add your favorite hammer into here. Ideally, you're gonna need some kind of way to compress the spring. Not because the new spring needs it, but because the old spring free length is significantly greater than the new spring. So here is the beautiful 100 pound per inch 914 rubber spring. There's the part number. I'll put it in the description as well. Old spring, new spring. So you can see that the spring's free length is completely different. This spring is significantly softer, and it requires a ton of compression to get it on and off the strut. There is one part of the old strut you got to save unless you buy it separately. So when these go on, I put it in the lowest position. It's snugged up nice and tight. It's not loose, but they work great. But you can see that you're going to have to compress this old one. And you also need your rear struts. I went with the Bilsteins because on Black Friday, our guy over at P&B Performance had these on sale for a killer deal. I got to give him a shout out. He has the fastest shipping of anybody with Porsche parts. I ordered these late on a Friday night, and the shocks came separately. One of the two came Sunday night. That's from Utah to Florida, and one of them came Monday. I don't know if they're drop shipped, but shout out to Eric for some sweet, fast turnaround time. So Bilsteins, complicated German instructions, all the hardware you need, some washers you really don't, but that's what you need to put this on your car. So we're gonna jump under the car and cover removal. I'll show you what to do on the bench, and then we'll pop it back in, and then we will have a nicely lowered, hopefully just a little bit, and great shock setup to put on our car. Okay, so one other thing with the Bilsteins, there are kits out there to convert these Bilsteins from your traditional like steel coils to an adjustable threaded body coilover. So the shocks have a circlip that allows you to change the ride height. There's 5 or 6 positions. And so in the future down the road, if I ever want to really rally this and like raise it, there are kits for the fronts and rear to change those out without changing the shock body. So your valving and all that stuff can stay the same. So I specifically shopped around to find a Bilstein set that could accept that in the future. If you buy the Bilsteins with the threaded bodies and all the different springs, and there's a lot more to it that I'm not super well versed in, it's like 800, 850 bucks. These shocks were like 150, 160 a piece. The springs are like 150, so less than 500 bucks for a pretty significant handling upgrade. Let's get the old one torn down. All right, if you didn't watch the video, I got sweet new Sparco / Oz Racing wheels on the car, 16x7, Bridgestone tires that are stickies, 200 tread wear. So these are gonna come off, so I will pop that off in the lift with the parking brake on. I can just pop these off without having to use an impact or anything like that. So go ahead and get that ready. If your target's not off, get your trunk open and get the cover for the top of your shock off. You're gonna use this again. You're not using the nut, but you will use this washer and this rubber piece here. So let's pop the wheel off, and I'll loosen it from the top, loosen it from the bottom, and we'll pull the old shock out. It's probably about a 5-minute procedure to pull out. Then you can take your time and clean and do whatever you gotta do. Like I said, disclaimer, if you have rear sway bars, especially if you have the poly bushings, which are the hassle, that's gonna take you probably twice as long. Overall, maybe an hour job to do both if you're taking your time. So let's get the wheel off and start tearing this thing down. All right, welcome under the car. Here's our strut, or shock, or whatever you want to call it. Here's the bolt. It goes from all the way over here to all the way over here. I don't know what size this is, but I know it's bigger than my 19. I don't have a box wrench that big. So this has flats right here to hold it, but it is also where the sway bar mounts. So I typically start with getting the sway bar out. I don't know what the scientific method to do this is, but typically I just get a pair of channel locks and I just pry the crap out of it to get it off. You could probably hammer it, but you really just need to get this some way that you can get some leverage and pop that out. This does have poly bushings, or like plastic bushings. I kind of trashed several of them, so I'll use a bunch of grease and I'll show you what I find is the best way to get that back in. So now that that's out, you can see we've got our shock loose. We will loosen up the top first. Then I'm gonna put the jack under here, and then we will loosen the bottom. So let's go up top, and then I'll come back down, pop that out, and then the shock will be out of the way. All right, now we're up top, and all that needs to happen, so I need to get my ratchet on here. That's the right way. I just need to hold this guy here just enough to break that loose. If you don't have a ratcheting wrench, this job is a good reason to justify to yourself getting one or borrowing one or whatever you need to do. So you can see I'm not gonna go all the way because I want this to hold the shock up while I get my jack. So I will take my jack, and in this case, we are gonna put the jack right under the disc and under my spacer. That's just gonna hold this guy up in place just enough for us to be able to finish our job up here. So at this point, totally loose. So we'll get all of the parts out of the way, and I'll show you what we've got. So we have the dust boot, the nylock nut, won't reuse, the cup cone washer, the kind of funny washer here, and this rubber piece will get reused. So that's that, and we're loose on the top. Back down here, and I'm just using a big crescent wrench, and we will get this guy loose. So once this is out, that whole thing's coming out. So be ready for that. I have had this apart at least a couple of times, so it is not insanely tight. This is not a nylock nut here. It is a giant, fairly thin nut, and it has a big boy lock washer on it. So this should come out like this, should pull out. And so you may need to play with the jack and push on the shock and like do this kind of game to get it to come out. So it looks like I have a non-stock lock washer in there, so I'm gonna fight with this a little bit so you guys can watch. Thank you, Crescent, for making an excellent hammer. There's that giant lock washer. So save those. You will need those again. So wherever I just put that giant nut, try and get it back. So I'm just gonna hold the shock up, pull this out. Again, it's a great time to clean this. And here comes the old, not very good KYB. Let's take it to the bench and get our new one assembled. Start. Old KYB, new Bilstein. I mean, it's got a picture of the Nürburgring, so it's got to make the car faster. And it's yellow, perfect color for this car. So this is the circlip I was talking about. You can raise and lower the car with this. This is in all the way low position, so we're going to start with that. I do not think you can do this once it's on the car. It doesn't have like, it's not threaded, but if you did switch that threaded body, this is where it goes, and it does still rely on this little circlip deal here. So we're leaving it in the extreme low position. 2 washers, which I did not use. German instructions, which are virtually useless. Sweet new spring from 914Rubber. Shout out again to those guys for helping support the Barefoot Garage. And it does come with a new nylock nut. One of the nice differences is this has these flats, which you got to use like, you know, pliers on. This has a hex head that you can actually put like a proper German engineered tool in there. So the only part of this that you need, I'm skipping the jounce bumpers, is you need this rubber piece right here. You need this retainer, and you need this upper spring part. So I'm gonna take this over and get the spring off. It was a little precarious on the last one because the springs are so small diameter and close together. So we're gonna strip this down and get these 2 pieces free, assemble the new one, and then back to the 914. All right, let's build a shock. I have my shock here. I don't think it matters which way is in and out. We'll call that outside the car, inside the car for the passenger side. We will put our lower bucket on here. I hope this is painted and I don't have to take this all apart because these are bare metal. We're gonna get that seated, no problem. I did confirm you want the spring with the 914Rubber facing the correct way, or at least that's how it would drive me crazy if it wasn't. The nice thing is this rotates, so if you really want to clock this spring so everybody can read your part numbers on your speed parts, you can do that. So let me get this settled on here. Make sure you guys can see this. So I've got my spring clocked in the correct way. These are my favorite lower seats because there's no capture around the edge here. I would love if there was like a little bit of extra retention there, but it's gonna be all right. The upper hat came from the old setup here. So when I put this on, clock it, and lock it in on that spring. So I can compress this, hear it, to the very bottom here. So what I'm gonna do is just compress this by hand and hopefully spin this guy right on. So it looks like there's just a little grease or something in here, but you should be able to do this pretty nicely. And then we will finish it up with our wrench. There we go, spinning nicely. Double check your spring is clocked and set. There we go, that is actually better. and you will know when it bottoms here. It is very solid and very absolute. So just to be sure, I'll push that down with both hands and then tighten it up. Lay that guy down. Get your box wrench. Put your hex in there and snug it all the way up. I don't know the torque spec. I don't think you could actually torque spec this because without a crow's foot, but that is plenty. And then you just put your bushing, and then this guy built 914 rubber spring and a beautiful Bilstein HD shock, ready to go back in the car. Let's do it. All right, rear trailing arm of the car. Here's your sway bar end link. This is where the shock goes. It's a good time to make sure that this is cleaned off. I don't know why my trailing arms are always oily, but the engine doesn't leak and it's gotta be CV boots. So we'll just give that a quick wipe down. I'm gonna show you what's gonna happen. That's where the top bolts in way up there, the bottom bolts in, and you've gotta deal with this end link. The problem is, if you bolt it in at ride height, the end link is right in line with the heat exchanger, right here. And it's very hard to put pressure this way. So my recommendation is to use your jack, lower your trailing arm a little bit. I know it's probably not great for your CV angle here. Boot still seems good. And I'll show you how we're gonna get this put back together. So I'm gonna lean you guys facing up, right there. Yep, so this is what you're paying attention to right there. So I'm gonna run this up into the shock. Once I put a little grease in this guy and in this guy, I like to use this white lithium grease. I've already cleaned my shock bolt here, and I am gonna take this carefully so I don't scratch anything that looks cool. And we're gonna run this all the way up into the shock tower, but I am not gonna attach it yet. You do wanna make sure that that top is at least lined up. So I'm gonna take my shock bolt, which I also have putting just a tiny bit of grease on. Let's do that now while I balance this whole thing. I'm gonna slide this guy in and all the way through. Perfect. Now that is in place, I'll just barely start my lock washer and my nut. Okay, I know you guys can't see the lock washer and the nut, but I promise they're there. So what you really want to be able to do is hit this with a hammer. And so I'm going to pull down on the sway bar a little bit. I'm going to lift up on the trailing arm with the jack. And we are going to do our best to be able to hit this square on. Otherwise, it's quite a pain. So let's see if we can do one shot. Perfect. See that grease explode? That means we are nice and tight. And so at this point, I will go up to the top. You can see that is a super tight connection. We will go up to the top, tighten the top, and then we'll come down and fasten this bolt right here, and we will have sweet new shocks on the 914. So I realize this was awfully dark for you guys. I'm using the jack to bring this up. I'm gonna take my upper rubber boot with the cone going up, at least I think. And I'm gonna put that on there. I'm gonna take my washer, put that on there, and then I have my new nylock nut. So this is where your ratcheting wrench, again, comes to save the day. So you can get this guy started by hand, and then all you gotta do is put your hex head in there and take your Allen key and hold it in place. Again, so much nicer than the flats on like those super cheapo KYBs. If anybody's watching this video and trying to get their 914 off the ground, I will give you the KYBs if you cover the shipping. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Barefoot Garage Jacks, or you can leave a comment or try to get in touch with me. But I'm happy to donate those to a 914, trying to get back on the road. Don't know the torque spec here either, but enough. At that point, you can just run your little boot back over, and you're done on the top. I'll give you one more tech tip while we're here. I have a friend who said 914s for a long time, and he recommended that you leave these a little bit loose, just kind of like finger tight. So when you put your top in, and if it's a little bit cattywampus, it doesn't just snap these. This is my second set, at least. So just a little bit of play here makes a big difference on your 914. Let's go back under the car and tighten this up. All right, so this is where your channel locks can go right there. See, I'm spinning that bolt. And I can put my big old crescent wrench right in here, and we can tighten this guy down and snug it off. Then we will be back in business with the sway bar hooked up with our new shocks in place. So, like I said, I put this in the lowest setting. It may be too low. My car has always been like just normal low car low, not slammed 914 low. I don't need slammed 914. I do live on a gravel driveway, which is great for the white wheels, but I want to make sure that this car is still very reasonable and drive, you know, speed bumps, driveways, normal stuff like that. So I'm going to tighten this up, and then we're going to put the wheel back on and drop it, see how the car is looking with its new stance. All right, I would say that's quite low. We may need to go up one notch. I mean, we got plenty of clearance here. We'll have to see if I can lower the front or want to lower the front that much, because it would need to come down probably like 2 or 3 inches. So I will throw a level on the door sill and just see how we're looking. The back is always tucked more wheel than the front because just the way these fenders are made and homemade and on and on and on and on and on. So we shall see. Ground clearance wise, it appears probably about the same. So I don't know. We may run with the slammed look and going from there. So really with the trailing arms running straight parallel out, that actually looks pretty good. So that's gonna do it for the Barefoot Garage tonight. Shout out to PMB for the excellent shipping and great sale, and for 914Rubber for supporting this video and having those awesome springs in stock are ready to roll. So go check out 914Rubber and PMB and get out there and work on those 914s. As always, Barefoot Garage Jacks right here on YouTube and Barefoot Garage Jacks over on Instagram in between episodes. See you guys.